don't ignore what your spirit has been trying to tell you. There are moments in life when everything on the outside looks normal, but something on the inside feels unsettled, restless, even disturbed. That is not random. That is not weakness. That is a signal. There are signs that something is not aligned spiritually, and most people silence those signs instead of listening to them. You feel constantly drained without a clear reason. You are surrounded by people, yet you feel empty. You are busy but not fulfilled. You are moving but not progressing. That is not just stress, that is misalignment. When your spirit is out of alignment, confusion becomes normal. You start doubting your value, your purpose, your direction. You begin to accept things you once knew were beneath you. Your standards drop, your clarity fades, and your vision becomes blurred. Not because you lost your ability, but because you ignored the signals. Pay attention to what drains you. Not everything that looks good is good for your spirit. Some environments look successful but are toxic to your purpose. Some relationships feel comfortable but are slowly disconnecting you from who you are meant to be. When you keep forcing yourself to stay where your spirit is suffocating, you begin to lose yourself. There is also a sign in your loss of passion. When the things that once excited you no longer move you, when your fire turns into routine, when your dreams start feeling distant, it is not always because you have changed it is often because you have disconnected. Disconnected from purpose. Disconnected from truth. Disconnected from the source that gives life meaning. Another sign is constant distraction. When you cannot sit with yourself, when silence becomes uncomfortable, when you always need noise to escape your own thoughts, something deeper is wrong. Because a healthy spirit is not afraid of stillness. A healthy spirit finds clarity in quiet. But when something is off, you run from silence because silence reveals truth. You also begin to compromise more than you should. Things you once resisted, you now tolerate. Lines you once refused to cross, you now step over without hesitation. That is not growth, that is drift. A slow, silent drift away from your core. And then there is the feeling you cannot explain. That deep inner knowing that something is not right. You cannot put it into words, but you feel it. You try to ignore it. You distract yourself. You convince yourself everything is fine. But the feeling does not leave, because truth does not go away just because you refuse to face it. Your spirit was designed to guide you, not confuse you. When you feel constant inner conflict, it is not because you are lost, it is because you are not listening. There is a difference. You were not created to live in confusion, emptiness, and disconnection. You were designed with clarity, purpose, and direction. But when you ignore the signs, you delay your own alignment. You stay in places you have outgrown. You entertain things that weaken you. You accept a life that is far below your potential. The longer you ignore it, the louder it becomes. What starts as discomfort turns into frustration. Frustration turns into exhaustion. Exhaustion turns into burnout. Not because life is too hard, but because you are out of position. You cannot fix a spiritual problem with physical solutions. You cannot heal inner misalignment by changing only external circumstances. You can change your job, your environment, your routine, but if you do not address what is happening within, the same patterns will follow you. There comes a moment when you must stop running and start listening. Stop ignoring and start confronting. Because those signs are not there to destroy you, they are there to redirect you. Everything begins to change when you acknowledge the truth you have been avoiding. When you start removing what drains you. When you protect your energy. When you reconnect with purpose. When you choose alignment over comfort. Because the greatest danger is not failure. The greatest danger is living disconnected from who you were created to be and calling it normal. You cannot afford to normalize what is quietly destroying your spirit. Many people learn how to function in dysfunction. They wake up, go through routines, smile in front of others, and perform responsibilities. But internally, they are disconnected, fragmented, and exhausted. The danger in that state is not that you collapse immediately, but that you slowly become comfortable living below your true design. There are patterns that begin to show when something is wrong spiritually. You start delaying things that matter. You lose discipline in areas that once defined you. You become easily irritated, not because people change, but because your internal balance has shifted. Small things begin to disturb you because your foundation is no longer stable. You must understand that your spirit thrives on truth, purpose, and alignment. When any of these are missing, your entire life begins to reflect that absence. It shows up in your decisions, your relationships, your focus, and even in the way you speak to yourself. The voice inside your mind becomes more critical, more doubtful, more negative. That is not your identity, that is a symptom. Another sign is that you begin to seek validation in places that cannot sustain you. You look for approval from people who do not even understand your purpose. You measure your worth based on temporary recognition. You chase attention instead of pursuing assignment. And every time you receive that temporary validation, it feels good for a moment, but it leaves you emptier than before. Your spirit was never designed to be fed by external applause. It was designed to be anchored in something deeper, something unshakable. When that anchor is missing, you drift. And drifting does not feel dangerous at first. It feels subtle, almost invisible. But over time, it takes you far from where you are supposed to be. There is also a loss of direction that many people ignore. You find yourself starting things but not finishing them. You make plans but lack the energy to follow through. You feel motivated one day and completely drained the next. This inconsistency is not just laziness, it is often a reflection of internal misalignment. When your spirit is not aligned, your actions lack consistency because your foundation lacks clarity. Pay attention to how you respond to truth. When something is wrong spiritually, you begin to avoid conversations, messages, or environments that challenge you to grow. You prefer comfort over correction. You resist anything that exposes your current state because deep down, you know something is off, but you are not ready to face it. But growth does not happen in comfort. Alignment does not happen in avoidance. It requires honesty. It requires the willingness to confront what you have been ignoring. There are also moments when you feel a strong urge to isolate yourself, not for reflection, but to escape. You withdraw not because you need clarity, but because you want to avoid dealing with what is happening within you. And while solitude can be powerful when used correctly, isolation driven by avoidance only deepens confusion. You must learn the difference between healthy solitude and destructive isolation. One brings clarity, the other increases chaos. Another powerful sign is when you begin to compromise your values for temporary gain. You start justifying actions that you once knew were wrong. You tell yourself it is necessary, that everyone else is doing it, that it is not a big deal. But every compromise weakens your spiritual foundation. It distances you from your true identity. The more you ignore these compromises, the easier they become. What once felt uncomfortable starts to feel normal. And that is where the real danger lies when wrong no longer feels wrong. You were not created to operate in confusion, but confusion becomes your reality when you are disconnected from alignment. Decisions become harder. Clarity becomes rare. You second-guess yourself constantly. And instead of moving forward with confidence, you move with hesitation and doubt. There is also a weight that you begin to carry. It is not physical, but it feels heavy. It affects your energy, your mood, your interactions. You wake up tired even after resting. You feel overwhelmed even when things are not complicated. That weight is often the result of carrying things that were never meant for you, unresolved issues, unhealthy attachments, misaligned priorities. You cannot carry everything and expect to feel light. You cannot hold on to what drains you and expect to feel energized. At some point, you must release what is not serving your purpose. Another sign is when you lose your sense of identity. You start adapting to every environment, becoming whatever is accepted in that moment. You forget who you are at your core because you are constantly adjusting to fit in. But identity is not something you change based on convenience. It is something you anchor in truth. When you lose your identity, you lose direction. When you lose direction, you lose purpose. And when you lose purpose, life becomes a cycle of existence rather than a journey of fulfillment. You may also notice that you are constantly busy but not productive. Your schedule is full, but your progress is limited. You are doing many things, but none of them are truly moving you forward. This is what happens when activity replaces purpose. Movement without direction leads to exhaustion, not fulfillment. There is also a resistance to discipline that begins to grow. Things that require effort, consistency, and focus start to feel overwhelming. You choose ease over growth. You delay what matters and prioritize what is comfortable. But discipline is not punishment, it is alignment in action. It is what keeps you connected to your purpose even when emotions fluctuate. When your spirit is misaligned, discipline feels like a burden. But when you are aligned, discipline becomes natural because it is connected to something meaningful. Another critical sign is how you handle challenges. Instead of seeing them as opportunities to grow, you begin to see them as reasons to quit. Your resilience decreases. Your patience shortens. You become more reactive and less reflective. This shift in mindset reveals a deeper issue not in the challenge itself, but in your internal state. You cannot control every situation, but you can control how you respond. And your response is often a reflection of your alignment. There is also a lack of peace that becomes noticeable. Even in moments where you should feel calm, there is an underlying tension. Your mind is constantly racing. Your thoughts are scattered. You struggle to feel settled. Peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of alignment. When that alignment is missing, peace becomes difficult to maintain. You begin to overthink everything. Simple decisions become complicated. You analyze situations repeatedly, trying to find clarity, but clarity does not come from overthinking, it comes from alignment. When you are aligned, decisions become clearer because they are rooted in purpose, not confusion. Another sign is when you start neglecting what truly matters. You invest time in things that do not contribute to your growth. You prioritize distractions over development. You give energy to what is temporary and ignore what is foundational. Over time, this creates a gap between where you are and where you are meant to be. You must ask yourself what you are feeding daily, because whatever you consistently feed will grow. If you feed distraction, you will grow in confusion. If you feed purpose, you'll grow in clarity. There is also a loss of gratitude that often goes unnoticed. You begin to focus more on what is missing than on what is present. You overlook progress and fixate on problems. This shift in perspective affects your spirit because gratitude is a powerful stabilizer. It keeps you grounded. It reminds you of value. When it is missing, dissatisfaction increases. And then there is fear, not the kind that protects you, but the kind that limits you. You start avoiding opportunities because of uncertainty. You hesitate to take steps because of doubt. Fear begins to control your decisions instead of informing them. This is not because you lack ability, but because your alignment has been disrupted. You were designed to move with purpose, not hesitation. But when you ignore the signs, hesitation becomes your default. At some point, you must become aware of these patterns. Awareness is the beginning of change. You cannot correct what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot realign what you pretend is fine. The moment you begin to recognize these signs, you are given an opportunity to pause, to reflect, to reset. Not by changing everything externally, but by addressing what is happening internally. Because everything flows from within. Your decisions, your actions, your relationships, your direction, they are all influenced by your internal state. When your spirit is aligned, these areas begin to improve naturally. But when it is not, no external change will fully satisfy you. There is a responsibility that comes with awareness. Once you see the signs, you cannot ignore them without consequence. Ignoring them will only deepen the misalignment, but responding to them creates the possibility of transformation. You must be willing to evaluate your environment. Not every place is meant for you. Not every connection is beneficial. Not every opportunity aligns with your purpose. Discernment becomes essential when you are seeking alignment. You must also evaluate your habits. What you do daily shapes your direction. Small actions repeated consistently create significant outcomes. If your habits are misaligned, your results will reflect that. You must also evaluate your mindset. The way you think influences the way you live. If your thoughts are filled with doubt, negativity, and limitation, your life will mirror those patterns. But when your mindset shifts toward clarity, purpose, and growth, your actions begin to follow. And you must evaluate your priorities. What you place first determines what you become. If your priorities are centered around temporary satisfaction, your life will reflect temporary results. But when your priorities are aligned with purpose, your life begins to move in a meaningful direction. Change does not happen instantly, but it begins with a decision to no longer ignore what you feel, a decision to confront what you have avoided, a decision to realign with what truly matters. Because the signs you have been experiencing are not there to confuse you. They are there to guide you. They are indicators pointing you back to alignment, back to clarity, back to purpose. And the moment you start paying attention, everything begins to shift. And now you have a choice. You can walk away from this moment and continue ignoring what you feel, silencing those inner warnings, pretending everything is fine, while slowly drifting further from who you were created to be. Or you can decide that enough is enough. Because the truth is, those signs will not disappear. They will only grow louder. What whispers today will eventually demand your attention tomorrow. And the longer you delay, the more it will cost you, young man, your peace, your clarity, your purpose. You were never designed to live confused, drained, and disconnected. You were designed to live with power, with direction, with meaning. But that life requires alignment. It requires courage. It requires the willingness to face the truth about where you are right now. So this is your moment. Not tomorrow, not someday. Right now. Stop ignoring what you feel. Stop tolerating what is draining you. Stop settling for a life that feels empty inside. Listen to your spirit. Realign your life. Remove what does not belong. Reconnect with what truly matters. Because the greatest tragedy is not failure, it is living your entire life out of alignment. Knowing deep down you were meant for more. And you are meant for more.